Welcome back, everybody, to the newest episode of PenPodcast.com. I'm your host, Matthew Harms, founder of Pen for Hire, where we offer premier ghostwriting and author coaching services. Also, the creators of the Pen Podcast, where we sit with authors, writers, writing industry professionals, subject matter experts, and all-around interesting people that can benefit the writing community. Today, I have the pleasure of being joined by Claire Draper. How are you today, Claire?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Where are you calling in from?
I live in New York City. I live in Harlem, so I very much am a city person in a lot of ways. And when I go home and visit my family, I'm like, wait, what do you mean we can't like go to dinner at like 9 p.m.? They're like, oh, everything closes. Like they sit the last people at 8:30. I'm like, oh, I could get pizza at like midnight if I wanted to. What do you mean? Like what do you mean? I'm hungry now. I'm a night owl. And no one else in my life is except for my partner. So like it's very, people are like, you stay up until 2 a.m. I'm like, yeah, because my city allows me to.
Still, it's so funny because I'm from New York. I was born and raised in the Bronx. I'm in Westchester now. Mm-hmm. And my brother moved like 2 hours in northeastern Pennsylvania. And my big argument has always been every time he tries to get me to move, I'm like, but number one, like you just said, your restaurant, everything closes early. I can't buy beer at the gas station at 3 a.m. Like I have to go to a dedicated place. And he always says, he goes, how often do you buy beer at 3 a.m? I'm like, I don't, but it's not the point. What if I wanted to?
I mean, actually, that was part of the problem the other night is I was in DC for a friend, for clients author event. We surprised her. It was super fun. And some of my other clients and friends of hers, we all went down together and drove down, but then we drove back same day to New York. So we didn't get back till New York at like until like 2-3 in the morning. We're like hungry. And the other person who stayed awake with me the whole time for the drive back, as the other two people in the back are full on snoring, is we're like, pizza sounds really good. Even Domino's is closed. Like there's nothing open like at this part of town at 3 a.m. because so many people have moved to the city. Things are closing earlier now because they're not staying out late enough for those businesses to keep it worthwhile to stay open. And I'm like, no. I want the New Yorkers back in the city, and I want the like transplants out because y'all go to bed too early. We're a night owl kind of city. We're much like Bourbon Street. If you're walking down the street, if you're walking down Bourbon Street in New Orleans, things are closed during daylight hours for a reason. Like this is not a city to be, up and at 'em at 6 a.m. unless you're going to work.
Right. That's the thing about New York City, right? You've got, I think, a very distinct delineation of you've got the people who are up at 6 because it's a working city, but then you've got the other people who are waking up around noon and they're up until 6 a.m.
Yeah. We're very much the city that never sleeps because we as individuals might sleep, but the trains are always running and people are always awake. Like, yeah.
Even if you couldn't get that slice of pizza, you had 4 or 5 bodegas. You could have gotten.
We could have gone to a bodega, absolutely, but we were doing the whole, we have food at home, and we're starting to get loopy as we're like trying to find a parking spot.
We're not even going to touch the parking because we'll go down a rabbit hole that we're not getting out of. No. So with that said, let me try to bring this back in. Claire, how long have you been a literary agent?
I've been working in publishing, like actually paid for my work since 2016, and then I've been a full-time agent since 2019, 2020. Yeah, 2020. I went from like part-time assisting, part-time agenting to full-time agenting in January of 2020, and then the pandemic like fully hit a couple months later. And it's funny to look back on the submissions that didn't sell that I sent out around that time. I'm like, of course no one like offered on this. I sent it out, and then 2 weeks later we were all at home 24/7. No one wanted to read a horror story, or no one wanted to read like, or even if it was something someone would have offered on, we were all just like making bread and trying not to like kill our roommates. So I'm like, of course that didn't sell. It was like such a weird time. It's such a weird time to have that transition. It was a weird time to have that transition in my career. But yeah, I've been full-time agenting since 2020 and then working in publishing since 2016.
Fantastic. Now, did you notice, and the timing's kind of interesting, anyone who knows my story knows I started Pen for Hire pretty much the beginning of the pandemic. Mm-hmm. So similar kind of issues, but did you notice an uptick in submissions somewhere like around the end of 2020?
You know what's funny? I didn't necessarily notice like a change in sort of like the timing of submissions, but there's definitely like certain times of year I start getting people reaching out more and stuff like that. Usually around this time, actually, when it's not the new year, when people are like, my New Year's resolution, I'm sending out my book. It's more so along the lines of like, I find, at least for like my query inbox, is seasonal depression starts ending. The days are getting longer again. And people are like, oh, I finally have the will to like send out the book I finished. So that time of year, I feel like I tend to get more submissions. But the people can be pretty consistent. Otherwise, like people go after their dreams, I think, pretty much year round though. The pandemic and how it changed sort of submissions though I was getting was not, I didn't necessarily, I think, get more or less. I did get a like weirder variety, I think, and people were trying to figure out what they wanted to write in a way that was different from before. Because not just what people wanted to write, but people wanted to read. Our art tastes collectively changed. You know, the world became very different very quickly. So I think readers and writers were trying to figure out, wait, like, I don't want to sit down and write a story that doesn't have a happy ending, or I don't like, you know, like depending on the book, I think people's tastes changed and in what they were doing and what they were consuming. So there was a slight shift in that, but it wasn't too crazy in my inbox. I can't speak for others. There are, I'm sure, others who would say, yeah, I got a way more submissions. But I did notice that people, because of the pandemic, a lot of people like were able to focus internally. So people who would have, you know, they normally have like activities they do that consume a lot of their days. They were like, wait, I'm stuck at home. I do have this idea and I'm finally able, like, I finally have the dedicated time to write it because I'm not, you know, hanging out with my friends 3 times a week, or my kids aren't going to sports. So I can sit down and like write as they're, you know, watching Encanto, you know? So like, it's a different sort of like, we allocated time differently in the last 4 years. So I think people who didn't write previously are now. But I think we all just reprioritized what we wanted out of life too.
It's so interesting just seeing the discrepancy on the back end of where it went, because most people would think starting a business at the beginning of a pandemic is counterintuitive. But I could not believe the amount of people who all of a sudden, as you just said, were like, you know what, I need help writing that book I've been meaning to write, because I now have 14 hours a day with nothing else to do other than watch the news. And that's going to make me crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think also like, you know, we like and we don't have to spend forever talking about the pandemic, you know, but like I definitely myself, I'm like, wait, my priorities have changed in the last handful of years. Like going out to a bar for 6 hours and talking about nothing of interest isn't like as exciting. And also like, not that I don't like a beer or, you know, cocktail or whatever, or some good cheesy fries, but like, you know, I do want to like sit down and have like interesting, fruitful conversations, or like, I do want to like sit. It's funny. I was just talking to my mom and I was like, I kind of want to have like a game night with like a handful of friends. And she's like, that's what me and my like my friends do. And I'm like, yeah, it kind of sounds like it's great. Everyone brings over a bottle of wine and like an appetizer or whatever, and you just sit down and like Bitch and Stitch has its relevance in life. Like you sit down and you like are all going to crochet or your own craft, and you're going to talk about like the woes of the world. Sounds great. Let's do it. Like I have a Millennium Falcon Lego set that I'm finally sitting down to build, but it's a very solitary experience and I don't want it to be. I don't necessarily want someone's input on how I'm building my Legos, but I do want someone to talk to as I build it. So yeah. And like in terms of writing, I've been telling a lot of my clients and like also just writers in general, writing itself or illustrating or whatever is a solitary experience. And so figuring out ways to make it less solitary, like joining writers groups or like going out in public to write, like go to your local library or coffee shop or whatever, finding online spaces like Discords, or if you have a social presence, say, hey, I don't know what to name this character, and they're like a villain. Can someone give me someone they hate in their life? I just need a name. Like engaging with like your community in that way, it can be funny. And because I have so many graphic novelists and other kinds of writers on my client list, they're like, I don't want to just post art all of the time, or I forget to, or whatever. And I'm like, have people like post a poll and say like, hey, what shirt should this character be wearing for this book? Like, or whatever, you know, like it's one, it's a social strategy, but two, it's just how do you make something like that is solitary, not solitary?
Yeah, especially when we were stuck being solitary for so long.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many 1,000-piece puzzles I did in the span of 2 years.
Exactly, right? Yeah, it's and I think we even don't want to, I think even when we want to do something that is independent, we still like, not that we crave human interaction. I think a lot of us would go move into the house in the woods, a la Kiki's Delivery Service, and just be an artist who like all of a sudden has a kid crash land in the middle of their woods. But I think a lot of us would escape from society in that way if we could have that chance. But I think, you know, sometimes after hours of creating something, you do want to like share it with someone or do some like you do want that activity around it. So I know I've been definitely like craving that in my personal life, my friendships, all of that stuff, is I want that activity. And that's definitely a big part of writing, is like the audience, the community, your peers, reading other books, you know, those are your contemporaries.
I am fully on board. I'm the most social recluse in the world. I'm happy to lock myself in that cabin for 6.5 days with no contact with anyone else other than reading and writing. But on the end of that Friday, I'm going to want to go out and socialize a little bit and then lock myself back up for another 6 days.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. So definitely. Yeah. So that's the pandemic, I think it also like remains to be seen in some ways how it's going to change like our taste in reading habits longer term, especially for like the children's book market, because, you know, like if you're writing, let's say, a YA novel now, and it's not going to publish for a year or two, well, that the kind of 14-year-old who would be buying your book 2 years from now, they experience middle school with their parents in the background from their bedroom on a computer. Like they didn't have a middle school dance they went to. Like their first period was at home. It wasn't at school in the like locker room. Like, so what is like, I think not necessarily like, are we going to have a bunch of like quote unquote pandemic books? Cause I think that what that term is, I think shift like what we thought it was and what it's going to be, I think is very different. But I think like in terms of what people experience or how they experience it and their like sort of frame of reference is going to be very different. Like where you were when XYZ is happening and what information readers sort of took on is going to be, it's just going to be different. So
I'm curious from a literary agent standpoint, because you kind of just touched on it, like what your thoughts are on people who try to write to the market or write to trends. Because I know in business nonfiction, which is what we do mostly at Pen for Hire, if the book isn't specifically about the impact of the pandemic, I advise people don't mention it because now you're dating your book. So I'm curious your thoughts on writing to market trends.
So I think there are lots of different things to consider in terms of the market. One, as a sort of like gatekeeper in the industry, and though I hate that like ideas, I'm very much like, let's swing the gates wide open. But in terms of thinking about like writing as sort of a business, or if you're looking to write a book and not just a story, and you're sort of trying to create a product or think of the marketplace, chasing trends is not necessarily always helpful, because by the time you've created something or you've jumped on the trend, it's already left. And rather predicting trends can be more helpful, or creating them yourself. So that's one thing, is that the biggest trend setters are the ones who kind of control the market. But that's all. This is also getting into like market theory and stuff like that. I think it's helpful to sort of be aware of what your audience is. I don't necessarily say write to everyone, because I think that's not helpful. Regardless of the type of book you're writing, whether you're writing for kids or adults, fiction, nonfiction, genre, whatever it is, imagining your perfect reader is ideally what you want to do. You're not trying to catch everyone, but you are trying to make sure that your perfect reader is satisfied. So like, don't write for your mother-in-law, write for you, or write for the person who's going to like buy 10 of your copies, is going to follow you throughout your career, is going to buy every book you've ever published, is going to follow you on every social media platform, is going to subscribe to your newsletter. Those are the people who make or break your career. The person who's like passively interested is not the majority of like people who buy books. The majority of people who buy books are not the people who buy a book or two a year. The majority of people who buy books are the people who buy 15 plus in a year. Like they're people who buy books regularly. So, and that's like just like that's to talk about that. But in terms of thinking of like the market in some ways is understanding like, okay, at least you mentioned the nonfiction space, because I have some, nonfiction books that have sold and are going like, are out or coming out. And the kind of thing about the nonfiction space is also thinking, what are people interested in? What are you interested in, but also what are people interested in? So if you're writing in the nonfiction space, I think like parenting is a big one right now, and not just like how to be the best parent, but how to fuck up your kids a little less than you were fucked up. How to take it easy on yourself, but also how to like, one of my favorite books of the past year is Casey Davis's How to Keep House While Drowning. Another one was Fair Play. I also listen to a lot of nonfiction audiobooks, but I think the kind of what I liked about those books was that there was sort of like a very real growth that the authors themselves were taking, but also it very much connected to me of like, how the F does everyone else like have clean laundry all the time? Like, does everyone else not have a pile of clean laundry on their coffee table that's just not folded? Like, because that's me. Like, how does everyone else get it to the last step? And so, like, one, TikTok has been immensely helpful in just like getting to see people's lives where we're not like all buttoned up at work and stuff like that, but we're just like, you know, haven't showered laying in bed as people are responding to comments or things like that, or talking about how they're like dug through their trash. It's very like America's Funniest Home Videos without the curation. So, you know, I think not necessarily go on TikTok and find ideas, or go on social media and find ideas, because heck, those are some people's other ideas, but figure out what interests you or what problems or questions you're having, and going after that. Like, genuine, most market trends exist from a sort of like general interest from a number of people. Like, in the genre space, sort of what some people are calling romantasy, but it's really just, you know, fantasy and romance that is really well blended, is a genre right now that we in publishing are getting a lot of, are selling a lot of. And I think it's purely born out of the fact that, like, yeah, people, one, want the happy ending that like romance requires, but also like want more genre-y world building kind of stuff, that we've gotten to see, especially on TV in the last 10 years. So this is all to say that, like, when it comes to the marketplace, do you have to like be super chasing it? No, but what are your friends interested? What are you interested in? What are the questions you keep asking yourself? What are you seeing a lot of on TV? Like, Abbott Elementary, for instance, is a workplace comedy. That is not like a brand new thing. But like, having a workplace comedy that takes place in a school, is it, and the way it's being created is so fresh and original. Or like Grand Crew, it's just friends, but it's taking place in a wine bar instead of a coffee shop. Like, it's functionally the same show of like friends doing, like, a group of friends doing stupid things, talking about their lives and the woes of dating and work, but it's LA, it's a group of Black people sitting in a wine bar. Like, it's functionally the same sort of premise of a thing. So figuring out, like, okay, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Like, we all joke about, there's like that old sort of writing thing of there are only 7 stories. There's only so many things that exist, so many ways of telling a story, and so many things that exist in the world. Because we're all human and we all like the same things. But poke at the new things, reinvent it. Don't plagiarize. Don't do anything like that. But what is something you love, and what, like, you get inspired by it? I like tell a lot of my clients, I'm like, you're trying to figure out what this book is like, or what you want it to have. Make a list of your favorite movies, TV shows, books, graphic novels, anime, manga, all of that, and write down what are the favorite things you love about that. Do you love its symbolism? Do you love its themes? Do you love this one character like dynamic? What are the things you love about this, your favorite pieces of media? And say, okay, how can I take, like, keep removing, like, okay, I really love, dragons. I'm going to make sure I write a book that has dragons in it. I really love, like, color symbolism. I'm going to make sure my book has a lot of color symbolism. Or I really like biblical themes. I'm going to include that, or whatever. I say that because my partner has just finished watching Trigun. So she's connecting that to like Full Metal Alchemist, and it's the only thing discussed in our house on that half of the house. So, but my point being is, take inspiration from everywhere and then fully make it your own, but there is a reason Hosier's new music is like, he based it off of Dante's Inferno, his next album. Like, it's not like he just created it out of thin air. He was left alone in the pandemic to stew with his own thoughts. But two, he said, I'm inspired by this really freaking old text. Like, even Shakespeare stuff was not original. Even like Hades and Persephone, the version we have of it is not the original version. Like, Ovid's version of it is not the only and is not the original. It's just the one that survived and got written down. And now now we have 1,000,001 Hades and Persephone retellings that exist now. Heck, and also, this is one of my biggest pieces of advice now that I've gone on this rant. Check out the public domain. Great Gatsby just entered the public domain. I'm sure is Peter Pan in the public domain? There are all sorts of stories that have in the last set of years entered the public domain that no one knows about. Or like nonfiction, go find that historical figure that really hasn't been written about. Like, I attended a graphic novel event this past weekend, and one of the people who had created an entire graphic novel said, I created this because I'm normally a picture book creator, and I wanted to write a picture book about this basketball team, this integrated basketball team. I think he said it was in Indiana in like the 70s or something, 60s or 70s. And there was too much material for a picture book, and he ended up making a graphic novel instead. One, it was his first graphic novel, but I was like, and he fictionalized it because he realized there wasn't like he was starting to move into a space where he's like, if I'm inserting all this dialogue, that's not exactly like what happened or what was said. And it is a lot of work. You get to take you can take more liberties with historical fiction than you can do with nonfiction, but go find the things that interest you. And also the things that like are undiscovered. There are all sorts of like historical figures or subjects or things that are still being talked about. Like brand new discoveries every day. Go dig into them, write a book about it. Sorry, now I've just completely rambled for far longer than I intended to about the marketplace and how to write.
Oh, that's fine. And honestly, I think it was very helpful. And in fact, I think a lot of people overlook. I know I did. I just wrote down research the public domain, because there's always like, where can I draw from? Where is there other ideas? As you mentioned, with the 7 different types of stories, I still remember how my mind was blown when I learned about the hero's journey for the first time. Yeah. And it's like, oh, shit, every fiction store really does follow the exact same structure. There's almost no way to break it without disappointing.
Star Wars is very much based off like the 7 Samurai. Like there is nothing original, and yet there is everything that's original. Like I feel like when I sit down to watch Bob's Burgers every week, it is so original. Like Bob flirting with the deli guy, but also not, over a turkey because he keeps messing up his turkey the week of Thanksgiving. Like completely unheard of, but also I myself have had to watch my parents buy 2 turkeys the week of Thanksgiving because one didn't end up it didn't defrost. And so now my parents are spending the night running water over both turkeys, trying to get them defrosted for the next day. So that the family of 30 coming over can actually eat on Thanksgiving Day. Nothing is original, and yet everything is. So like getting inspired. Actually, there are lots. Check out the what's in the public domain. What are the rules of it? Because also you do not want to plagiarize, or like copyright is a thing. Learning about that, but also like I know I have art all over my house that is inspired by Gustav Klimt's art style, but it's like, tangled characters, or like I have one of my clients' Sailor Moon drawings, but it's her versions of the Sailor Moon characters. And it very much looks like her art style. So like the like take inspiration from everywhere. Take inspiration from your kids, your partner's life. Like heck, sometimes people forget that like 50 Shades of Grey was Twilight fan fiction, or that the Hunger Games happened because I want to say she was watching like a TV show or something and it happened back to back. I'd have to like look up, but like she was inspired by watching TV and then created an entire franchise out of it. Or like people get inspiration from all sorts of places, and just kind of, rather than we tend to do this as humans, rather than passing it off, like investigate it like within yourself and within the like go after that question rather than pushing it aside. The best books are made that way, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I was just, the thought that was going through my head is Harry Potter. I mean, she came up with that idea while sitting on a train, and then had to use the initials because they thought no one would want to read a fantasy book, by a young boy wizard written by a woman. And now she's the most best-selling, wealthiest author, I think, of all time. So
yeah, I don't know if that's still the case, but yeah. Well, and the thing is like Percy Jackson, for instance, one of my recent obsessions. I've been going through all the books ahead of the TV show coming out. Is that, first of all, they're like, how many books has Rick Riordan written at this point? Like, I think I've personally read 10 in that like sort of universe, but I think he has over 20. He has his own like imprint at Disney, the whole 9 yards. And God, the world building is amazing. He said, I'm going to take Greek mythology and Roman mythology, and I'm also going to pick and choose exactly what I want. Because there are some things where he's like, in character or like in universe, they're like, the humans didn't get that right. They messed up that part of the history, or they messed up that part of like our story. And then there are other things they're like, yeah, they got that one right. Like, and it's so deeply entertaining. And one, my partner keeps laughing at me because I was a Latin nerd, but now I have all of the Greek and Roman like gods' names running around in my head, and I'm like messing up all of them because it's just I've blown through that series way too quickly. But he was, I don't quote me, I believe partially inspired because his kid was neurodivergent and he wanted to make sure his kid was represented. And then he said, as he was writing the series and time was changing, he pulled in so many characters in different ways of like kids being represented. Like one of his books, the newer books coming out, has supposedly, it is like co-authored by a gay man and is going to have like one of the older gay ships in that universe. It is like Rick one really took notes from his audience and said, yeah, I'm going to take this criticism. I'm going to fix things. I'm going to run with it. Like he is honestly one of the better writers I have ever seen. The comedy in those books, unparalleled. Yes. Yes. So, and I say this to everyone, masterclass in writing Rick Riordan's books. Whether you are adult, whether you're a kid, masterclass in storytelling, also in comedic storytelling and timing and weaving a narrative. He said, like, nearly all of his book series are like, I believe, 5 books. It is very hard to hold up a story over the course of 5 books, and especially books as long as his for that age range. And he does it so fantastically. Oh, it's good. I am so glad we're getting television out of that. Because man, is is that universe so rich and funny and supremely hysterical. Those characters are some of the best written characters in all of my recent, in all of the things I've read. That his books do rank pretty high. So,
well, thank you for sharing that. And I just realized we probably could go for like 3 or 4 hours because
probably.
I'm gonna have to get you back on the show to go into some deeper diving stuff, but just the overall kind of perspective on the market, I think, is incredibly helpful. Just looking at other, people who have done things similar to what you want to do, drawing inspiration from that, because there is nothing new under the sun. In fact, one of my business clients opens up his new book by saying that and quoting the Bible, like, no matter what it is, someone's done it. 100 of people have done it. Thousands of people have probably done it. The difference is how you do it. Yeah. And who you do it for, because you can't write a book for everyone. You mentioned that earlier. Another belief I live by: if you try to write a book for everyone, you'll wind up writing a book for no one.
And I mean, like, Everything Everywhere All at Once, just swept at the Oscars, and is a mother-daughter relationship in a movie is a parent-child relationship a brand new story. But how they told that story was so fresh and so new and so original. To say we're going to take sci-fi and space and time melding and jumping and like multiverse and whatever and generational like emotions and so like you can tell something that is you and original and speaks to your experience, even if there are only so many, even if you're working within the structure of a narrative.
Absolutely. Claire, for anyone listening who wants to find out more about you, what you do, the books that you've currently represented and the authors, the type of people that you would be interested in working with, how can they find you and get in touch with you?
All of my social media is is at Draper _ Claire, DRAPER _Claire, CLAIRE. And also check out my website. I have everything linked to everything else. But my website has a growing list of resources. It has my clients' books. It has my deals I've done, what I'm interested in seeing in my inbox queries wise, so on and so forth. My website has just about everything. And, I'm on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, all of that. So you can find me just about anywhere.
Fantastic. I really appreciate you taking the time today. We're definitely gonna have to get you back on in the next season, because I think you're one of our last guests for this season, and we're taking a little hiatus, but I wanted to end with some of this professional introspective as to what's going on, what people can be doing if they don't want to just go straight to the self-publishing road. So we really do appreciate your expertise for joining us today on the Pen Podcast. Yep. For everyone listening at home, head over to Claire's website, find her on social media. Definitely support our guests, help them support you in your journey. And Claire, once again, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on. I really do appreciate you taking the time out today.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thanks.
Thank you.